Hello everyone, I am Ranalina Siloan and today I will be discussing about the International Monetary System. So what is International Monetary System? It refers to the system prevailing in world foreign exchange markets through which international trade and capital movement are financed and exchange rates are determined. So, the International Monetary System governs the use and exchange of money around the world and between countries. So, first, why does economies needs money? So, we all know that money allows us to meet our basic needs. So, this topic defines money as a unit of account that is used as a medium of exchange in transactions. So, without money, individuals and businesses would have a hard time purchasing, selling, or selling what they need, want, or make. So money provides as universally accepted medium of exchange. So second is how a currency exchange works. So it works both physical and online. So what I have said earlier, that it allows to exchange one country's currency to another by executing buy and sell transactions. For example, I have a US dollar and I want to change it into Australian dollar. So I would bring my US dollar to the currency exchange store and buy Australian dollar. But the amount that I would be able to purchase would be dependent on the international spot rate. So we have the types of international monetary system. First is the floating exchange rate. Second one is the peg exchange rate. The third one is the dirty float. And the last one is the fixed exchange. So what is floating exchange rate? So a floating exchange rate refers to your currency where the price is determined by the supply and demand factors relative to other currencies. So in this graph that I've shown is an example of an increased currency supply from S1 to S2. So at the same demand, the demand one implies that the currency pair price will depreciate, as you have seen this. So the increased demand from D1 to D2 at the same supply S1, the supply 1 will lead to currency appreciation. So if your currency expected to depreciate, if the market views the government as unstable, although the floating exchange rate is not entirely determined by the government, so they can intervene. They can intervene when the currency is too low or too high to keep the currency at a favorable price. So how floating exchange work? So it works through an open market system in which the price is driven by consideration and the forces of supply and demand. So as what I have, remember, if the supply is increased but the lower the demand, so it means that the price of a currency pair will fall. While if the increase demand and the lower the supply, it means that the price will rise. So why government can intervene in a floating exchange rate? So it is because to keep their currency's price at a favorable level for internal trade. This also helps to avoid manipulation by the other government. So the second one is the peg exchange rate. So the purpose of a peg exchange rate is to stabilize the value of the local currency, keeping it at a fixed rate in order to avoid exchange rate fluctuations. So a peg exchange rate is also known as fixed exchange rate. It's a currency regime in which the country's currency is tied to another currency. So So a country may decide to stabilize the exchange rate through a peak exchange rate to prevent an excess of overvaluation. To understand better more, the primary reason of a currency pegs to encourage trade between countries to lessen foreign exchange risk, because countries generally show a currency peg with a stronger or more developed economy, so that the domestic companies can access broader markets with less risk. So, the next one is dirty floats. What is a dirty float? A dirty float occurs when the government monetary rules or laws affect the pricing of its currency. So a dirty float is a floating exchange rate where a countries like central bank sometimes interfere to change the direction or the rate of change of a country's currency value. So generally, in a dirty float system, it acts as a buffer against an external economic shock, like a real oil price shock. That's one of the example. So before its effects become distracting to the domestic economy. So a dirty float is also known as managed float. The last one is a fixed exchange rate. So a fixed exchange rate is an exchange rate where the currency of another country or commonly traded commodity like gold or oil. So it is when a country ties the value of its currency to some other widely used commodity or currency. A fixed exchange rate tells you that you can always exchange your money in one currency for the same amount to another currency. So it allows you to determine how much of one currency you can trade to another. So, for example, if you go to Saudi Arabia, you always know a dollar will buy you, let's say 3.75 Saudi riyals. So since the dollar's exchange rate in riyals is fixed, Saudi Arabia did that because its primary export is oil. So, and all oil controls and most commodities contracts around the world are written and executed in dollars.
Good evening, everyone. So let me now move on to the next topic, which is the gold standard in 1876 to 1930. So let's start. Many years ago, Richard Nixon took us off of the gold standard.
Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets. We will press for the necessary reforms to set up an urgently needed new international monetary system.
So let us further discuss. Gold standard is a monetary system in which standard unit of currency is fixed quantity of gold or is kept at value of fixed quantity of gold. In an international gold standard system, gold or a currency that is convertible into gold at fixed price is used as a medium of international payments. Under such a system, exchange rates between countries are fixed. If exchange rates rise above or fall below the fixement rate by more than the cost of shipping gold from one country to another, large gold inflows or outflows occur until the rates return to the official level. So, a simple gold standard definition is a monetary system that involves a country's national currency or money printed on paper to have its value directly linked to gold. This means gold has served as a medium of exchange and store of value. Each country, the rate at which its currency unit could be converted to a weight of money. Because the government of each country on the gold standard agreed to buy or sell gold on demand with anyone at its own fixed rate. The value of each individual currency in terms of gold and therefore exchange rates between currencies was fixed. So next, to get the selection of the worldwide gold standard within the late 19th century, it is vital to take after the occasions during the period late 1970s and early 1980s. However, within the later 18th century, wars has commenced and exchange of gold from China to Europe, but Europe has only limited usage of which where it result to depleted. The silver reserve across Western European and they joined together with USA, and there was a multiplication of bank and stock notes utilized as a means of barter to money or cash. For example, when USA wanted to convert their currency to gold at a rate of $20.67 per ounce of gold, then the British pound was pegged at 4.2474 pound per ounce of gold. As long both countries were freely convertible into gold, then the dollar 26.67 dollar divided by 4.2574 pound is equals to 4.8665. Because the government of each country on the gold standard agreed to buy or sell gold on the demand with anyone at its own fixed rate. The value of each individual currency in terms of gold and therefore exchange rates between currencies was fixed. Also, maintaining adequate reserves of gold to back its currency's value was very important for the country. Under this system, the system also had the effect of implicitly limiting the rate at which any individual country could expand its money supply. So, a major defect in such a system was its inherent lack of liquidity. The world's supply of money would necessarily be limited by world supply of gold. Moreover, any unusual increase in the supply of gold, such as the discovery of a rich loot, would cause prices to rise abruptly. For this reason and others, the international gold standard broke down in 1914. During the 1920s, the gold standard was replaced by the gold bullion standard, under which nations no longer minted gold coins but backed their currencies with gold bullion and agreed to buy and sell the bullion at a fixed price. The system too was abandoned in 1930s. So these are the reasons for failure of gold standard. Violation of rules of gold standard, also restrictions on free trade, and inelastic internal price system. Also, during the interwar period, the monetary authorities sought to maintain both exchange stability as well as price stability. This was impossible because exchange stability is generally accompanied by internal price fluctuation, as well as unbalanced distribution of gold. And lastly, internal indebtedness. So let's sum it up once again. The gold standard is a monetary system in which a country's currency or paper money has the value directly tied to gold. With the gold standard, the countries have agreed to turn money into paper into a fixed amount of gold. A country using gold standard sets a fixed price for gold and purchases and sells gold at that price. This fixed price should be used to determine the value of currency. Why has the gold standard crashed? Well, because when the United States returned to the gold standard in 1934, they increased the price of gold dollars because it took more dollars to buy 1 ounce of gold than before. The situation was the dollar was worth less.
Good day everyone, I am Jessamine Sanico and I will be discussing the interior war years and World War II in 1914 to 1944. So, all through this year, we've been exploring various things that have been said about the interwar period which call 1914 to 1944. Although, you could extend it perhaps to 1950. The Bretton Woods Agreement dates from 1944, but there was still a lot of turmoil afterwards, including hyperinflation in Germany, Japan, and China. Before all these three countries established a new gold standard basis in 1949 to 1950. Even the Bretton Woods signatories had a lot of turmoil, including a wave of devaluations worldwide led by Britain in 1949, and also a bit of floating dollar in the United States before the Fed Accord of 1951. But this is really about the 1914 to 1939 era, in particular, the Great Depression. The trauma associated with this experience is still around with us today and tends to take the form of an intense attachment to floating fiat currencies by both left-leaning Keynesians and the right-leaning monetarists. This attachment tends to have a basis in two related ideas. The first basis is the first related ideas that is floating currencies or the tool of monetary distortion. This is necessary element of the government. The second idea is the gold standard system. This is the time somehow didn't work properly, although this is never well explained. In 1933, the London Conference implied that the international gold standard was acceptable as a medium of exchange in all economic activities, whereas both United Kingdom and USA has convened to prosper the advantage of the gold standard. President Franklin D. Roosevelt said that all national activities should return to the gold standard. The United Kingdom and the USA have come together to benefit from the gold standard. Further, France and Italy both sent designations demanding a prompt return to a completely convertible worldwide gold standard. A proposition was costed to stabilize trade rate between France, Britain, and joined together states based on a framework of drawing right, but this as well collapsed. The essential issue was what is deemed the best gold standard should consider or follow. In the years that followed countries after two-sided exchanging agreement. By 1935, the monetary arrangement of most Western countries are progressively overwhelmed by the developing acknowledgement that a worldwide clash was almost certain or even inescapable. The growing realization that a global conflict was almost probable, if not inevitable gradually overwhelmed the financial system of most Western nations. So, during 1920s, Grimness estimate taken the resettle the world budgetary framework and had cut military consumption radically. Yet, with the equipment of Axis powers, war in Asia, and fears of the USSR sending out socialist upset, the need moved toward combat hardware and away from restoring our highest quality level. The last part of 19th century best quality level came with when the endeavor to adjust the United States budget in 1937 led to the Roosevelt recession. Indeed, even such gold backers as Roosevelt's spending shift yielded that until it was conceivable to adjust the financial plan, a highest quality level would be incomprehensible. If the gold standard of the time was fine, then it could be fine to use it again. Also, you have to clear out all the nonsense theory necessary to invent a monetary cost that didn't exist, to allow for the revival of correct theoretical foundation that will allow a gold standard system to re-emerge in the future. That's all.
Hello everyone, my name is Romanuel R. Ilustrisimo and I am here to present about the Bretton Woods system. So these are the overview of the things that we will be discussing. Of course, I will be introducing to you what the Bretton Woods system is, and that would be our introduction, the goals of the conference, its expected benefits, the outcomes, the problems, evaluation and breakdown, and some examples. Before we go ahead and start introducing what the Bretton Woods system is, I'll go ahead and introduce you to the two key actors of the Bretton Woods system. Although the Bretton Woods conference itself took place over just 3 weeks, the preparations for it had been going on for several years. And the primary designers of the Bretton Woods system were the famous British economist John Maynard Keynes and American chief international economist of the United States, Treasury Department Harry Dexter White. Keynes' hope was to establish a powerful global central bank to be called the Clearing Union and issue a new international reserve currency called the Banker. The Banker was a supranational currency that John Maynard Keynes and Schumacher conceptualized in the years 1940 to 1942 and which the United Kingdom proposed to introduce after the World War II. In White's plan, he envisioned a more modest lending fund and a greater role for the US dollar rather than the creation of a new currency. In the end, the adopted plan took ideas from both and they lean more towards Harry Dexter's White's plan. Introduction. The United Nations Monetary and Financial Conference was held in July 1944 at the Mount Washington Hotel in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, where delegates from 44 nations created a new international monetary system known as the Bretton Woods system. These countries saw the opportunity for a new international system after the World War II that would draw on the lessons of the previous gold standards and the experience of the Great Depression and provided post-war reconstruction. It was an unprecedented cooperative effort for nations that had been setting up barriers between their economies for more than a decade. They sought to create a new system that would not only avoid the rigidity of the previous international monetary system, but would also address the lack of cooperation among the countries on those systems. The classic gold standard had been abandoned after World War I, And in the interwar period, governments not only undertook competitive devaluations but also set up restrictive trade policies that worsened the Great Depression. And those at the Bretton Woods envisioned an international monetary system that would ensure exchange rate stability, prevent competitive devaluations, and promote economic growth. So the goals of the conference is intended to govern currency relation or regulations and establish legal obligations through International Monetary Fund or IMF, set a standard for exchange rates. So back at those states, 1 ounce of gold is equivalent to $35 and establish international monetary cooperation, money pool from which member nations can borrow funds. So on July 1, 1944, as the battles of the Second World War raged in Europe and the Pacific, delegates from 44 nations met at the secluded Mount Washington Hotel in Bretton Woods. This is to participate in what became known as the Bretton Woods Conference. Their purpose was to agree on a system of economic order and international cooperation that would help countries recover from the devastation of the war and foster long term global growth. At its conclusion, the conference attendees produced articles of agreement for the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, which is the IBRD, and the International Monetary Fund, which we all know as IMF. Years of planning and discussion preceded Bretton Woods and laid the foundation for the conference's success. While the final articles were ultimately influenced to a significant degree by the initial plans of the United States, with contributions from the United Kingdom. Other countries attended consultations and presented proposals containing their own vision for an international bank prior to the conference. So the expected benefit from the Bretton Woods system is through capital controls. The countries would pursue the full employment and price stability with low inflation because back at those days, one of the reasons why the Bretton Woods system failed it is because of very high inflation rates. But I will go ahead and discuss that further after this one. Going back, price stability with low inflation and full employment and the external balance in keeping exchange rates stable simultaneously. So benefits of Bretton Woods system included 44 countries. Those countries were brought together to help regulate and promote international trade across borders, as with the benefits of all currency pegging regimes. Currency pegs are expected to provide currency stabilization for trade of goods and services as well as financing. All of the countries in the Bretton Woods system agreed to fix peg against the United States dollar with diversions of only 1% allowed. Countries were required to monitor and maintain their currency pegs, which they achieved primarily by using their currency to buy or sell United States dollars as needed. The Bretton Woods system therefore minimized international currency exchange rate volatility, which helped international trade relations, and also more stability and foreign currency exchange was also a factor for the successful support of loans and grants internationally from the World Bank. Outcome of the conference in 1944 is that they agreed to a system of economic order and international cooperation, which I mentioned a while ago, that would help countries recover from the devastation of the war and foster long-term global growth. And it's one of its significance is it established the International Monetary Fund. Also, it established the World Bank, and it fixed the rate of international exchange based on the United States dollar or the US dollar. Also, quotas embedded in the International Monetary Fund were achieved Several conferences dealing with the world monetary problems caused by the Great Depression had ended because of the Bretton Woods system. And like I said, the creation of IMF and World Bank and the dollar standard. Problems of the Bretton Woods system is that occasional devaluations under the supervision of the IMF to remove fundamental disequilibria in the balance of payments. United States, free from external economic pressures, countries were not willing to accept the high inflation rates. Countries no longer based this value on gold. The biggest advantage of the Bretton Woods regime was that it provided a stable exchange rate environment that nurtured the reconstruction of the world economy and the growth of international trade and finance. However, its main disadvantage was that it required coordination of policies among member countries, and the adjustment problem in Bretton Woods reflected downward rigidity in wages and prices, which caused high inflation and which prevented the normal price adjustment of the gold standard price specie flow mechanism to operate. Consequently, payments deficits would be associated with rising unemployment and recession. So the Bretton Woods system collapsed because the monetary crisis reached its nadir or the lowest point when the United States President Richard Nixon caused the collapse of the Bretton Woods system by officially suspending the dollar's convertibility to gold on 15 of August 1971. Evolution and breakdown. The reserves of most countries became a mixture of gold and dollars, so it's not only about the dollars but both gold and dollars. In 1958, countries in Europe completed the restoration of convertibility. National interest rates were closely linked with each other due to the opportunity to move funds across borders. So, because of Bretton Woods systems, um, International Monetary Fund has founded a way to link each other due to due to be able to transfer funds from those and from any other countries. So, mas napadali ang pag-exchange ng pera at that time. In 1970, the balance of payment crises were so massive that finally countries couldn't keep up with the adjustments, so the system collapsed and replaced with a regime of floating exchange rates. So, example, so we all know that there has been an issue wherein the Philippine peso has weakened. So, if the Philippines devaluated the peso due to CA or current account deficit, the value of assets held in pesos would decline and savings would move to other currencies. The Bank of the Philippines should market sell its foreign assets and purchase pesos in order to maintain the peso exchange rate against the US dollar. Without sufficient reserves, the loss of foreign reserves might occur if significant enough result in a devaluation. So if we go ahead and compare Philippine peso to the United States dollar, of course, US dollar is a very strong currency compared to the Philippine peso. But there are also instances where in Philippine peso is strong. If you compare the Philippine peso to Japan yen, we all know that Philippine peso has an advantage or has a greater value compared to the Japan yen and many more other countries. So that would be all. I think that's the end of my report. Thank you so much, and I hope you learned something.